my last video, I selected a clip from one of my online lessons. And this clip starts at the beginning of the lesson. So the reason why I wanted to show that really had to do with how important those first few minutes are in the lesson. You see, when I work with a student, they come from different areas of problem sets, let's call it. So I like to think of it where when someone comes into a lesson, they're coming to me with a specific problem that they may or may not be able to articulate. And when that's the case, then I need to do a little bit of intelligence gathering to really come up with a personalized plan for the lesson. So when we start about something simple like, how was your day, that kind of stuff. But often I like to transition to a very specific question very quickly in the conversation. Sometimes I'll do it right away and I'll take charge of the lesson, or sometimes I'll actually want to know how their week's been because I know a bit about their personal life. So I'll be invested in it that way. But in this case, the question really is, how's music? And so that's my favorite question to ask at the beginning of any lesson is, how's music? And once I ask how's music, what it does is it turns the direction of the conversation directly onto them and what role music is in their life. I mean, the repertoire they're working on, whether it's a song or a piece or a composition or anything, if that's a priority of theirs, they'll answer a question with how's music in regards to that. That will be contextual. It will be in there. If it's not, then it means that music to them isn't at the forefront of what they're doing. If I have with a really serious student, how's music will always be addressed with their current pieces that they're working on, right? If it's more of a classical student, or their current songs, or the current techniques, or current concepts, like music theory student, current concepts that they're working on. They're like, man, I got this guy having an okay time with the scales, or like in the excerpt that I posted just a few days ago, my student talks about intervals. So he starts, and when I ask the question about music, music's good, I didn't have enough time, he's an adult, he's got a family and all that, so completely understandable. But then he starts getting into something very specific, starts talking about the fifth. So he's a music theory student, so this idea of measuring an interval, measuring the fifths, it's now showing me that this is at the forefront of his work as a musician. And so we've obviously already have an agreement that we're in a music theory teaching environment. That's really what the lessons are based around, and shouldn't really deviate from that, and I completely agree. And so when he starts talking about the fifths, I'm like, okay, now he's choosing to steer the conversation towards music theory and the specific things that he was able to latch onto mentally and allow himself to apply and progress with the concepts. So once I was able to get that information from him, sometimes, especially with younger children or anything, it could be more of a case of where you have to pose several directed questions to extract any information like that. But once I get that information, then it's pretty simple. Then I look at it and go, well, I know what the next step should be. Let me now bring up what that next step is, and then gauge their acceptance of that. Sometimes they'll have the case where they'll feel like that's completely acceptable, sounds good, they're along with the process, I'm still in a trusted position at that point, and that's good. And we can kind of just move on with that and get them their progress. And then other times it's something where they're very intimidated by that. They don't feel like that is the next step. Sometimes people already have their opinion on that kind of thing. and that's okay. It's really a matter of convinced until convinced otherwise. So if anything, it's really about this, these first few 5 minutes, and how those 5 minutes can go into a situation where it establishes who has control of the session and what the session will be like for the rest of the hour. And once we're at a point where we're kind of mutually accepting what the next step is, very rarely, sometimes a student will be like, well, maybe I'm not ready for that step. Maybe I can do this other kind of sub step, if you will. And I'm like, you know what, that's fine. That's fine. We still gotta, my next step truly is this. If you want to input other steps in between there, that's up to you. That's up to you. Just realize that that's a choice you're making, it's a decision you're making right now, and we're just gonna work with that. Okay. And so the most important aspect here is to get the student comfortable to be doing something that they're not comfortable doing. It's more of a matter of comfortable exploring a process or an application area that they just haven't explored in a way that they maybe don't even know how to explore it, or haven't even conceived mentally how to explore it. And so that's where our work comes in. So in my previous excerpt that I showed, I talk about this is with an interval lesson, getting to the point of intervals. We've learned perfect intervals at this point, and secondary intervals, and we've already introduced, and I think probably in our last session before that was recorded, then we did altered intervals. And so those are kind of 3 different categories of concept testing. And to show competency in each one of those, small kind of test just needs to be administered just to see how accurately, first off, and then how quickly and fluidly those concepts are being able, those question concepts are being able to be answered. Once that's the case, I mean, then it's pretty clear to understand if there is an obstacle, where it is, and if there is a weakness, where it is. And the personalized plan comes from that. And it can all be done within the first 5 or 10 minutes of the lesson. Tiny bit of small talk, the beginning, doesn't have to be minutes or anything like that, just a few kind of basic questions, then focusing the spotlight onto music. And then from there, this is our next step. How do you feel about the next step? If they feel totally ready, you just test and assess. If they pass the test, then great. Let's just go right on and explore that new concept in depth. And now the whole lesson is about learning new material and building on the old. If they're not confident with that, which was the case in the example that I posted, then we test and see what the specifics are. What's confident, what's not, and more importantly, why. And once we get to that point, then throughout the lesson, and I'll post more clips from the same lesson, throughout the lesson, then they get to a point of greater confidence where they're able to do and willing to do. I think that's the more important part. It's not able, but willing. They're willing to take a harder test. They're willing to up the difficulty and to demonstrate a higher level of competency. And that's true progress, and it can happen directly in the lesson. So thank you for watching this. And if you're interested in studying with me, then please contact me in my DMs. All right, thank you.